Howdy again everyone, and this is another one of those camera lenses I've been looking forward to testing out for a very long time, the Fuji XF 18-55mm f2.8 to f4 OIS. It's only for Fuji's mirrorless X system cameras, where it was the first zoom lens in their range, and the first to be image stabilized too. Fuji entered the mirrorless game with an initial focus on high quality lenses to lure in professionals and enthusiasts, and have cleverly combined that philosophy with a typical kit lens design to produce a lens with very high build quality and a much brighter maximum aperture than you usually see on an everyday kit lens. f2.8 at the wide angle end of the zoom range and f4 when you zoom in makes this lens about twice as bright as anything you'll get from another 18-55mm kit lens, giving you faster shutter speeds and noticeably more out of focus backgrounds. It manages to do this while not being physically much bigger than a cheaper kit lens, but the price is much higher. The official UK price is a whopping £600 or about $700 US. However, these lenses can be found second-hand or in a white box over on eBay for literally half that amount. First up, let's look at the build quality, which is impressive. The lens's body feels very solid and is a tightly assembled combination of metal and high-quality plastics. There are separate buttons to turn the image stabilization on and off, and to switch between automatic and manual aperture control. Like almost all of Fuji's higher quality XF lenses, you do get an aperture control ring. This one moves freely because of the maximum aperture changing as you zoom in. The zoom ring is metallic and is very smooth to turn, and turns slightly heavily. It's one of the most well-damped zoom rings I've ever handled, although bits of dust can easily settle in its furrows. The focus ring turns just as nicely. It's electronically coupled to the lens's autofocus motor and responds quite precisely in manual focus mode. As you zoom in and out with this lens while shooting video, you will see some flickering from the variable aperture changing, unfortunately. Let's look at its image stabilization now. Here's some footage at 55mm with it turned off and now turned on. As you can see, it's pretty effective, helping you to get smoother video footage and sharper still pictures. The autofocus motor is quite quick and perfectly silent in operation. I didn't find its accuracy very impressive though, it would slightly miss from time to time. The lens comes with a nice quality plastic hood, and the filter thread is only 58mm wide. Overall, it's by far the most solidly built and nicest quality kit lens I've ever even touched, in stark contrast to Fuji's cheaper XC zoom lens series. Now then, image quality. When it came out, this lens quickly developed a good reputation for sharpness on Fuji's old 16-megapixel cameras. Today, I'm mounting it on a 24-megapixel Fuji X-T20 camera, which should be a lot more challenging. Firstly, at 18mm and f2.8, the lens is perfectly sharp in the middle of the image with very good contrast. Image quality in the corner is a bit soft though. Stop down to f4 for more contrast there, and at f5.6 the corners are pretty sharp. It stays this sharp down to f11, but stop down to f16 and the image gets a little soft from the effects of diffraction. So it's not too bad of a start at 18mm. Let's zoom in about halfway to 35mm. At the new maximum aperture of f3.6, the image remains quite sharp in the middle of the frame, although contrast is slightly lower now. Corners again are softer, although stop down to f5.6 for good sharpness there. It stays this sharp down to f11 again. Finally, let's zoom all the way in to 55mm. At the new maximum aperture of f4 in the middle of the image, resolution and contrast jump up a little again, looking very fine. And the corners look great, straight from f4. They stay this sharp down to f16, where we can see that softness from the effects of diffraction re-emerging. So on the whole, I'm happy to report quite a solid performance from this slightly older lens, giving sharper image quality than any other Fuji zoom lens I've tested so far. At wider angles, you should stop down the aperture to f5.6 if you want really sharp corners, but when you're zoomed right in, there are no problems. Alright, how about vignetting and distortion? This is normally taken care of by your camera or automatically in Fuji's RAW conversion software, but some third-party editing programs let you see the real picture in your RAW photos. At 18mm we see quite strong barrel distortion, stronger than normal for a zoom lens, and quite dark corners at f2.8. The corners get slightly bright at f4 and f5.6, but only slightly. It's when you zoom in to about 26mm that distortion straightens out. Zoom in to 55mm and we see pretty obvious pincushion distortion now with vignetting at f4, but that corner darkness is pretty confined into the edges there. f5.6 sees a little more brightness in the corners. I'd say that the vignetting performance is not too bad, but distortion is a little wild with this lens. This lens can focus as closely as about 40cm. At f4, the close-up image quality there is a bit soft. Stop down to f5.6 though for a bit more sharpness. Let's see how it works against bright lights then. At wider angles we see no real problems, but zoom in and a little flaring is visible, although contrast remains fairly high. Finally, bokeh. This lens can give you more background separation than a typical standard kit lens, which is a nice little bonus. Here's the bokeh at its widest angle, and now zoomed in. Lovely and smooth, no problems here really. Overall, well, I'll skip straight to the point. I love this lens, it's just my kind of thing. I love its small size, lovely build quality, and nicely sharp pictures with smooth quality bokeh. Most of all perhaps, I like that wider than normal maximum aperture of f2.8 to f4. It won't turn your photographic world upside down, but it makes a very attractive difference. The whole package is just so kit lensy, and yet the sheer quality is just a world away from the crowd. Its official price of £600 is rather high, the typical eBay price of £300 a bargain. So my advice is, find a new copy of it in a white box and you'll be laughing. This lens definitely comes highly recommended.